the performance. I'm excited to introduce to you Dr. Vincent Castano, Dean of Institutional Effectiveness at Fayetteville Technical Community College. He'll be presenting today on tools for research and data analysis. The meeting is being recorded. Thank you, JJ, for that. And at the end, Vincent will leave time for questions. So if you have questions, feel free to pause till the end. I would ask that everyone double check and make sure that they're on mute so that we can give our full attention to the presenter. And then without further delay, Vincent, I will turn that over to you.
Thank you, Sarah. And I'd like to thank the Performance Partnership for inviting me to give this presentation. I've revised this slideshow since last year. And when we talk about the tools for research, I don't know if anyone has ever done this, but you type in the Google search engine student achievement and research, and you have millions of hits. What's credible, what's irrelevant, what's something that would stand the litmus test of reliability. That wasn't me. So when we talk about research and data analysis, it's important for us to be strategic about what we need. And with academic program reviews, while the literature is consistent regarding what you should measure and how, that doesn't necessarily mean that you have to evaluate every single piece of information, but it's important for you to define what you're going after. So what does this all look like? Back when I was working on my doctorate, someone defined student achievement as finding a needle in a haystack, which I didn't quite agree with at the time, and I still don't. But that's why it's important to be very strategic about what it is you're trying to measure or improve. And academic program reviews offer, in my opinion, the best vantage point of any program of study. You can also do comparative analyses. You can, maybe you're looking at starting up a new program of study. So where does it all start? Well, in order to give you tools to conduct the analysis, it's important to define the mission. Okay, so an academic program review. Is it a one and done? Is there a perfect template that you should use? The answer is no. It's a multi-layered, multivariate process. And there's a 50,000-foot view, which is designed to give you a very global perspective of a program, because you're going to be asked to prove two different things. One, how relevant is it to someone that has absolutely no knowledge about what you're trying to achieve? And then you're going to have people that are practitioners within the field, that are statisticians, that are very much in the know regarding what's current. So the purpose of an academic program review, and there are many adjectives and descriptive verbs that we can use, but I think the first is that program reviews inform. They inform about your program, they inform you about your students. And that's often something that's overlooked, especially Michael Meadoff in his book, Planning and Assessment in Higher Education. He talks about how sometimes the students are lost in program reviews because we get too focused on the numbers that we fail to define our student population. And a program review is meant to guide. So the tools that you use, they're meant to help guide the decision-making processes. And whether you're using the tools for evaluation, or if you're using them as a reference or to set up a benchmark, you'd be surprised at the number of program reviews that begin, and they do not have a framework from which to reference. In other words, where did we start, and where do we need to be? Where do we want to be? And another way to view the program review process is, perhaps a SWOT analysis. What are the strengths of your program? What are the weaknesses? Where are the opportunities for improvement? And what are the implications for future research? So this gets us into what are the needs? As I said before, in order for you to use the research tools that are relevant and will give you the most up-to-date information as possible, you need to be very specific about what you're going after. So where did you start? What's your baseline? And what are the benchmarks for student success? And you will find many, many books written about student success and achievement. Are they one and the same? Are they different? Different studies will focus on GPA as achievement. Others will look at retention. Others will look at term-to-term persistence. So what kinds of information are you going after? Are there requirements that you have to fulfill? Is this being done for accreditation? Is this being done for your own knowledge? Are you trying to demonstrate or prove the currency of your program? How relevant is it to the current population that you serve? For some schools, they have a very limited geographic region. For others, it spans several hundred miles. And in order to ask the big questions, you can't let yourself be afraid of the technology. There are gaps of where we just simply can't get the information that we may need, but don't let that stop the planning process. Don't let that stop you from asking the big questions, because you can get there. Also, how often are you conducting these kinds of analyses? Is it annual, every 3 years, every 5 years, never? Because the reason why I ask is that there are tools that evolve over time, whether you use federal data sets, state produced data, local data. So timing also plays a very big part in this. So, as I said, we're getting to the part where we're going to start going after the tools that may give us the benchmarks or help us compare against other institutions of similar size, if that's what you're trying to prove. But what is your benchmark performance for success? Is it a single variable? I think most of us would say no. There are many data points or many facets of academic achievement that we strive to maximize. So we say it's multi-valued. And there are national benchmarks, and I'll show you those later in the presentation. There are state benchmarks for success that colleges must meet, whether we're in North Carolina, Georgia, Pennsylvania, or California. So before you dive in to dissecting performance measures, whether they were produced by the state or if they were published in a magazine article, it's important to define who you are as an institution. You're putting together the puzzle. You have to know what the picture is going to look like at the end. And the research tools are going to help you follow the directions. So who are your students? Do you serve mainly older students? I don't prefer to use the term traditional and non-traditional because the average age of our students in the North Carolina Community College system is 29. I know that typically when we think of universities, it's 18 to 22. Even that age is moving forward. I believe now, according to the Chronicle of Higher Education, it is now 20. So there's some time. We're getting older as we go to school. Persistence. What are the barriers? What are the challenges to persistence? And when I say persistence, I mean term to term. Sometimes when we say retention and persistence, we use them interchangeably. We shouldn't, because they're different. retention can refer to within term, such as how many students you retained in a particular course or a particular program during a particular term or cycle. Persistence, how many students started out in one fall term and are continuously enrolled to the next fall term. Completions or graduation rates, is that a benchmark that in which you judge academic success? And this can be cohort-based. You can define your cohort as using federal definitions such as first-time full-time or first-time part-time, although I believe that narrows your population, but it's really what you feel are the proper indicators of measuring achievement. And we'll go over the federal definitions as well as other local definitions. Student achievement oftentimes are measured by cohorts. A cohort are a specific group of students that fit specific criteria that begin at a particular point in time. The federal definitions will often go back 3 years to determine a normal time to completion. And the same thing for a part-time student. And then we have transfer rates. There are some schools in their mission statement where it says their goal are to prepare students to either go into the workplace or to continue their education beyond the scope of the 2-year degree level or 4-year. So looking at your mission statement isn't necessarily a bad idea to help guide this entire process. Okay, now that I've done a quick overview, and this was a quick overview of an academic program review because we're talking about student success and we're going to be talking about research tools, but we need to focus on what we're going after and how we're going after it. Okay, benchmarking. I can't stress this enough. It's important that you establish benchmarks. And there is somebody on your respective campus that is taking a snapshot of data somewhere. If at my college, it's me. They know that I'm constantly assessing data and so on, so my phone will ring first. Okay, so with academic program reviews, who am I? Where have we been and where are we going? We're talking about student success. Let's say we're using GPA, and the average GPA of our currently enrolled student population is 2.2, and we want to move it to 2.6. Okay, well, how will we do that? That's the first question. The next question that many schools may have include, well, where do we start with all of this? And that's not wrong to say. It's okay to say, I don't know where we should start, but we'll find out. Now, there are federal initiatives that have been around for 10 to 15 years that can help you get started. The first I want to talk about is the voluntary framework of accountability. Okay. Now, the VFA is somewhat unique in that at the federal level, it focuses on community colleges, and they collect a lot of data. And they also focus on the indicators of student success, early predictors. Now, I will tell you from a statistical point of view, open door institutions have a very difficult time predicting student success because we cannot control the kind of students that enter our doors. Some are ready to tackle English 111 and Math 143. Some are not. So if you're interested in researching what are good predictors of student success, this website will give you data in which to make your decisions, and that's important to do. I know that I'm talking to a lot of people on this call who have many, many years of experience, And back when I started, I think it's about 18 years now, that it wasn't uncommon for us to make a gut decision based upon a certain set of circumstances. Why? Because we didn't have the data to have something to fall back on. It was based upon what we knew at the time. Well, now we have different kinds of quantitative data to support decision making. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time here, but this is good. The VFA, if you haven't looked at it, if you haven't investigated, please do so. It can really help you in terms of identifying what areas of student achievement.
Have you heard of that one? I haven't looked.
The National Student Clearinghouse over the past 5 years has really jumped into not only tracking where students transfer, but also evaluating completion rates and success. 5 years ago, it was awfully difficult to find out where students went unless we called them and asked, did you transfer? If so, where? Now you can upload groups of students formatted according to student trackers requirements, and you can determine their subsequent enrollment, or you can look at previous enrollment. You can look at an incoming group of students as a cohort, and you can determine how many schools they've attended. If they've attended 6 different schools but never graduated from any of them, is that an indicator of success or lack thereof? And I'm only using that as an example. So that's why I said it's very important for you to answer. It's important for you to establish the big questions that you're trying to answer right away. And like I said, there are different ways to measure student achievement. And now I've listed the top 3 that are measured at the federal level. Graduation rates, and I think that there's a reasonable amount of debate out there about what's the most accurate, and I would defer to your judgment on this. What's out there, what is readily available in terms of data, you have graduation rates, transfer out rates. Now, transfer out rates refer to those students that didn't necessarily graduate from your institution, but transferred to another school before they graduated. Some schools view this as a predictor of success. I know that the Department of Education captures this metric. It's not a required data screen on iPads for most of us. Also cohort-based, because you can fit different groups of students into a single definition. Now, that has its pros and cons as well. A first-time student, how do you define first time? Is it first generation? And if so, how do you capture whether or not they're truly a first generation student? So it's almost like who's on first. But regardless, if you're unsure where to start, these are good areas to help establish the overall 50,000-foot view of success or success indicators. Next is something that myself and my research colleagues across the state and nation know very well. It's iPads, the Integrated Post-Secondary Education Data Systems. Now, we all have our unique nicknames for this series of survey collections. However, if you don't know what iPads is, it is a collection of surveys, and I believe there are 6 or 7 that range from finance, your fall enrollment, to 12-month enrollment, calculation of credit hours, FTCC activity,
You're okay, can't you?
as well as completions. Okay. Now what I do is I took you to the National Center for Education Statistics. And now there are the 2 at the top I want you to look at are the College Navigator and Data Lab. College Navigator is what is readily available to the public. and it offers a snapshot of your institution based upon the data that's populated into the IPED surveys. Let's look at College Navigator. So all you need to do is you can type in the name of the school. It's very user-friendly. Let's look at my school. And I don't usually put in the rest of this because I know exactly what I'm going after. But it's going to show me the results. And all you got to do is click and expand all. And this gives you a snapshot of your institution. It's not a deep dive of data, but it is what is out there for other researchers to look at, as well as what the public can look at on a daily basis. You have HR information, which is incredibly difficult to get. So if you're ever doing a salary study or any sort of faculty study or anything dealing with personnel, these data sets, which I'm going to show you how to do a deeper dive into, are going to be very useful. The only part of IPEDS that's real time would be the tuition and fees. Everything else, you're looking at older data. You're looking at data that's at least a year old. So keep that in mind. Think about the maturity of your data sets that you're looking at in order to make decisions, or in which you're measuring student achievement against. Now, the financial aid information, that's good. That's good information to know. What percentage of your students are utilizing federal financial aid monies? What's the average amount of loan debt that are going, that students are accruing at your institution? And then you can also get a quick snapshot of your population. Now, the first to second year retention rates, as I said, retention and persistence are two different things. So, and they're actually working on this definition right now. But they're looking at first-time full-time students and first-time part-time students, which roughly equates to about 10% of your student populations. So we do a pretty good job, 63% for our first-time full-time, first-time part-time about 50%. About the average across the state of North Carolina for the community colleges. Overall graduation rate, it all depends on how you want to measure the graduation rate now. Looking at first-time full-time students. Same thing for your transfer out rate. You want to pay attention to the definitions that are being used. If you're going to measure yourself against federal benchmarks or state benchmarks, you're going to have to use their definitions. You can't apply your own logic against these numbers because you're always going to have discrepancies, and they're going to be even more difficult to explain. If you can't explain it to someone else that has absolutely no idea what you're talking about, then you're not using the right tool. You want the tool to be transparent. You want the tool to be validated. NCES, the National Center for Education Statistics, they produce hundreds of reports every year about student achievement as well as intended outcomes. There are many predictors for student success. Which ones are the most relevant for you? That's something that you are going to actively investigate. Right now, we're still at the 50,000-foot view. This is not in the weeds yet. You have your demographic breakdowns, students completing within the prescribed timeframes. I know that accrediting agencies are looking at this very, very closely right now.
Looking at ours. He's down in
at the normal time to completion
outcome measure.
Federal level for a 2-year associate's degree, it's 4 semesters. But most of us in the community college system, an associate's degree is 5 semesters. So it's kind of an unfair advantage. You get lumped into the 150% normal time to completion category. So maybe on-time completion is something you're looking at. Maybe you're looking at the average amount of time it takes for a student who walks into your institution for the first time to graduate. Now, the outcomes measures, those are something that were recently begun about a couple years ago. They want to take this first-time full-time, first-time part-time cohort, and then they want to dissect it even further. They want to go into your first-time transfer-in students that are full-time and your first-time transfer-in students that are part-time. So they're taking a look at a fall term that began back in 2008 for the purposes of this discussion.
Outcomes.
And they're looking at not just your normal time to completion, but also the 4, 6, well, 200% would be your 4, your 6-year, 8-year completion rates. Apparently, the first set of standards that were developed back in 1984 weren't enough.
For the first time, because they have more than a mobile that want to receive something from them.
This is very difficult data to capture for any.
That's an understatement. And
it does give you an idea of
higher than theirs.
Of what the different graduation rates are. And then you can also go down to look at distance ed and so on. Okay.
I don't think so.
So I'm going to go back into this real quick.
I chose no audio on the front.
Now the data lab, that's where you can really get into, don't let the power stats and linear regressions scare you or anything. It's really just a deep dive of the data. So you're looking at maybe, let's see. Don't worry about this over here on the left-hand side. You want to go to something called power stats or quick stats. Like I said, it just depends on what you're looking at, or trend stats. Now we'd want to focus on undergraduate. Maybe you're interested in financial aid or power stats. Maybe you're looking at something that's historical. I would use this more for benchmarking. Now, definitions change over time. Student populations change over time. The paradigm for student success never remains static. So keeping these assumptions in mind, you need to have a starting point. If you don't have access to your institution's data or as deep of a data dive as you would like to do, this isn't a bad place to start. Now, it does require you to create a login and password, but it takes 2 seconds. So this really gets into the nuts and bolts of where it is you want to go with your student achievement model. Because within an academic program review, it's considered best practice not just to look at enrollment, retention, and so on, but also loan debt, also what's the average amount of financial aid, is your institution just simply too expensive? Now, in North Carolina, we don't have that issue among the community colleges, in my opinion, but this is where you can really get into the levels of data that will contribute to your analysis. Now, there's something else called NCHED. That's been around for a long time. North Carolina Higher Education Data System. And in the past, we would submit enrollment and financial aid information once a year. And now, the University of North Carolina system, they're the ones that collect all this information, and they can aggregate it by colleges. Now, it's SAS-driven, so give it a little while to work. But let's say we're looking at our transfer students. And as a matter of fact, I use this tool to assess in the aggregate how our students perform at different institutions in North Carolina. Like I said, it's SAS driven. Sometimes it takes a little while to load, but it's really a powerful tool. And you can drill down to individual colleges. So in the fall 16, there were 10,264 transfer students. Okay, let's say that I want to look at transfer enrollment trends. Okay, well, looks like the numbers are getting bigger and bigger. So as a system, we began back in 2007, and most data sets will only go back 10 years. You may find a federal data set that goes back longer, but 10 years is usually the max that you're going to get for anything reliable. Why? Because data collection methodologies change, as do the tools for capturing that data at the local level. So we've had a pretty significant increase in the number of students that connect. Okay. Well, what if you're just interested in your school? You have your 50,000-foot view, and then you can drill down into individual community colleges. And I'll pick on me, Fayetteville Tech. Okay. Now we've got our trend indicators here. It shows where our transfer students are going. Are they transferring with an associate's degree already or other associates? They didn't have a degree when they transferred. Lots of ways to measure here. Now up here, you can also drill into the 16 different public universities where they may have transferred. You have Appalachian, and you can see how many went there. ECU, Elizabeth City, my alma mater, UNCP. Fayetteville has a lot of folks that go there. My other alma mater, Western Carolina. Okay. Also, you can look at transfer rate GPAs. Now here is where you can select the transfer institutions, and here you can even get more granular. You can examine it with students who transfer with a degree, with an associate in arts or associate in science, or maybe another associate, like an associate in applied science, or just under 30 hours or over 30 hours. Lots of different ways to measure here. So if the heavy lifting's already been done for you, use existing data sets, but do understand how they collect the information so that you can have a comfort level with this. Then you have graduation rates. Like I said, you can focus on your institution. Wow. Now, like I said, you're not always looking at real-time data. At the federal level, you're going to be looking at data that's at least a year old. At the state level, it averages 3 to 5 years. It's not a bad thing, but think about the maturity of your data set. And there's different schools of thought. Sometimes the decision makers want to see something right now, real time. Others, they want to see something to compare against. Different philosophies here. Okay. Now, something else that we're asked about regarding student success revolves around the workplace, the workforce. When the student graduates with that diploma in welding or the degree in building construction technology, are they going to have a job waiting for them? What about in automotive? What's the job demand? There's something, now there are different tools at the state level and at the federal level. At the federal level, there's something we call EDEPS. This is mainly economic development, but if you're interested in looking at wage trends based upon your SIP codes or SOC codes, every degree or every credential that we offer has a SIP or SOC code attached to it. If you can get that, and you should be able to without any trouble, you can see the averages. Now, like I said, it'll go back a few years. A good data analysis will always go back a few years to give you a frame of reference. So let's look at accountants and auditors. Okay, reasonable growth, and over the next 10 years, anticipating that this is going to grow by 10.7%. Now, EDEPS is it's a very useful tool. It's either you love it or you hate it, but its methodology is very robust. Now, you can drill down. This is at the federal level. You can drill down in North Carolina. So let's say you're contemplating a new program of study, or maybe you're looking at why the number of students are declining in a particular program. Is it the quality of instruction? Well, you may have assessed that already. You may have tons of surveys saying the faculty is great, support services are wonderful. Okay, what's another reason? Well, demand. So that's something else you want to look at. Economic analyses, you cannot separate the two anymore in education. The economic models for success you're going to find have just as much applicability to student success. NC Tower is another tool. It's relatively new. It started, I think, about a year or two ago. Now, NC Tower, it allows you to dive deeper into the same data sets. Well, not the same data sets, to be fair. NC Tower does exclude a certain number of students that persist outside North Carolina. NC Tower is a deep dive of data just in North Carolina. You don't necessarily have a federal benchmark here. So if you're just interested in North Carolina, this would be a reliable tool, but it's evolving. So keep that in mind. But it's better than nothing at this point. So EDEPS is good. NC Tower is also another tool for you to use. It's just a question of what you feel most comfortable using to make your decisions. Highly paid community college degrees. I think a lot of times when we're looking at completion rates as a benchmark of student success, we're saying, oh, if we're graduating more students, then we're doing our jobs. Okay, but what if enrollment drops off in a program? Is it just an anomaly? Is it just something odd that's happening in the job market? Or is there a real problem? So when you're doing an academic program review, it's important to look at the economic health of your programs. Are they relevant? For instance, if you look at welding or plumbing, those were among the very first programs of study ever offered by the North Carolina Community College system. They're just as relevant today as they were back in 1961. But there are discussions about which programs of study produce the most number of graduates that are considered relevant and current. And these are very big questions. And these are not questions that you can answer just by looking at one slide. It's going to take looking at multiple data sources to really get a feel as to, okay, what am I looking at? Am I looking at something that's 10 years old, or am I looking at something that's 3 years old or 2 years old, or something more near time? And what is the market potential of adding a new program of study? Forensic science, for instance, or maybe you're thinking about intelligence studies. You got to think about the market potential that goes beyond just the 5-year level, but 10, 15, maybe even 20 years. There are quantitative and qualitative stories to tell. You can't tell one without the other. That's why when you measure student success, just don't focus on the quantitative because that's the easiest data to grab. You got to focus on the qualitative as well. So for our discussion today, let's just look at, now our systems office produces annual statistical reports that are not password protected or anything like that. You can look at budget FTE by college. And systems office does a good job. They go back to 2010. If you have access to the North Carolina Community College data warehouse, probably your IE and IR officers have access. You can go back a little bit further. But you can look at curriculum student enrollment by term, the FTE, or let's say you just want to look at the annual statistical reports. Breaks down curriculum, corporate and continuing education, and the amount of FTE generated by each college. So not only can you get enrollment information, but you can also get budget FTE information. Okay. Program enrollment and FTE information. Now, for program enrollment information, or if you're looking for specific FTE information about a particular program, you're going to need to go into the data warehouse. Most schools only have 1 or 2 users that have access. You can also do a deeper dive of completions. But like I said, this is restricted access, so it's important to be very strategic about the questions you're trying to answer. Now, I talked about performance measures earlier in the slideshow. Before you start comparing yourself against performance measures at the state or federal level, it's important that you understand who you are as an institution. Who is it that you serve? Now, the 2017 Measurable Skills Gains Report, that's mainly corporate and continuing education. The state performance measures, they've been realigned over the past 5 or 6 years. As a matter of fact, I think they're getting ready to be realigned again. But it establishes methodologies and definitions regarding what the state expects each school to achieve in terms of performance funding. So I'll let you go through that at your convenience. Now, this is going to be a good example of, you have federal definitions of student success, such as retention and persistence. Then you have other definitions at the state level. And then you may have different definitions at the institutional level. Just make sure you're comparing oranges with oranges. There are lots of research organizations that can also help you answer questions about where do I find data. North Carolina Community College Planning and Research Organization. They're comprised of, or were comprised of, I'm president of it, of IE and IR professionals across all 58 community colleges. And on our website, we've even created different queries that your school can use, SAS-based or intrinsic informer, to, SAS-based really, to help you extract data. If you want the intrinsic informer queries, you'll need to go into what's called NC Lore. NC Lore is about 3 years old. North Carolina Learning Object Repository. All you got to do is request your username and password. And there are canned reports in there where you can download informer queries for enrollment, FTE, how to extract ICR reports, measure your graduates. Like I said, I'll let you go in, I'll let you log in at your leisure to look at these too, so that you can see what I'm talking about. Now, how you extract information, that's going to depend on how you're storing it. Now, Ellucian is our current SIS. It's really business-based. It wasn't meant to be an archival tool, but we do use safe lists. Your researchers use safe lists. What we do is we take snapshots of student enrollment at different points during the term, and then we create permanent save lists where we can pull them up 5 years from now. Gathering data, it is labor intensive, but so is helping students achieve their goals. So you want, like I said in the beginning, you want to define what you're doing and how you're going to do it. That will determine how you extract the information. And also, I think this is the best practice for us all to follow. How often are we evaluating ourselves against where we were 3 to 5 years ago? Now, your IR and IE office can help you with this information. Now, we have the capability of producing enrollment trends. Do we have more part-time than full-time students? Demographics. We can even get down to retention and persistence by program, by course, instructor. There are even studies that where you can pull up average faculty salaries. If you go back to the NCES website, you can actually go into Power Stats, and you can pull up the average salary information that was reported and aggregate to IPEDS. You can also pull budget FTE by program and course through our systems office data warehouse. Also, when you're evaluating student success, whose definitions are you using? The federal definitions or the state definitions, or your own? So you have a lot of different resources. You have our systems office in Raleigh. A lot of other community colleges operate independently, so we're lucky that we have a data repository with our systems office where we can extract information. National Student Clearinghouse has become a very, very powerful tool for determining what happens to your students after they leave. IPEDS, it's a data system that's been around since 1984, and there is a lot of information. If you just want a snapshot, you go to College Navigator. If you want something deeper, go into Power Stats. When I began in research and planning, I was asked, what's a good retention rate? Well, 100%, I guess. But you have to judge for yourself what is good and what's bad. In other words, if you have a 35% graduation rate, is that good or bad? Depends on how you define it. Also, it's important to organize your data so that it's easy to understand. You don't want to create a bunch of formulas that are meaningless except to a couple people like me. So make sure that you're presenting the information. I'm not saying go out and buy a new software suite, but you can use Excel, you can use charts, you can use SAS, you can use JMP to create the visuals to help people understand where you're going. Also, the qualitative advisory committees, also very valuable information regarding how your graduates are doing. Employer needs. Are you doing employer surveys? What sort of job placement reports do you produce? These are all variables that are going to impact academic performance, not just while your students are enrolled, but also when they graduate. So you're going to have everything mixed together. You're going to have the quantitative, the qualitative. You're going to have formative and summative assessments. So you can really gather a lot of information. You just need to know what it is you're going after, and also whose definitions are you going to use. Okay, show me the data. Okay, so where can we get this information? Where can we get student achievement information? Now you have companies out there that will say, well, for $75,000, we can tell you about your students and where they go. Well, okay, but for the most part, with some legwork, you can determine where these students have gone, where they're going, and also predictors for student success at your respective schools. So don't let the technology limit those discussions. That's all I have. Does anyone have questions? I can't see a chat box or anything.
Dr. Castano, I have a question here that says, can you go back to the slide with CC Pro?
Yes. Okay. SAS is a tool it's a free tool, actually. Every college, I believe, has about 1,000 licenses you can use for free. And there are different queries that have been written by our membership that you can use, as well as research regarding resources for students, instructors, to help build the mindset and help build the culture of assessment. So maybe you want to find out, do you have students that are eligible to graduate, but they haven't graduated yet with certificates? Well, our team has already created a SAS file for you to download and use. But like I said, you have a lot of people in the state that have thought about these questions and want to make these resources available to you. What other questions do you have?
At this time, there are no other questions in the chat box.
Okay.
So if there are no other questions, we'd like to thank Dr. Castano for his time and expertise this afternoon. We'd like to thank everyone for taking time out of their busy schedule to be here with us during the crazy time of year as we wind down another semester. Thank you for all the work that you do for our students. On behalf of the Performance Partnership team, we'll make sure that for those on the phone, the session was recorded. We'll upload that to the System Office YouTube account and make sure that you all receive a copy of the recording as well as the presentation that Dr. Castano shared this afternoon. So thank you for your time this afternoon and have a great remainder of the semester.